How's it going, Eliminators? Today, we're going to be doing an update on the Husqvarna ST224 snowblower that came into the shop with the cracked plastic console. So with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, so we're back in the shop with the Husqvarna ST224 snowblower here. It had the design flaw cracked console for the shifter cable. So I ordered parts for this machine on February the 27th, and I finally got the new console in. So I've started to disassemble the console. It's not super complicated. There's 3 different levers, a couple little bolts with springs, and some various 5/16 or 3/8 screws. They have all of these cables secured with these little pins and spring clips there. There's a few of them. You're basically just popping stuff out, and then the console disconnects from the front console there, and yeah, that came right out. So the reason we're here in the first place is because Husqvarna decided to use plastic for the bracket that secures the shifter cable. So every time you go to shift, you're putting loads of stress on that bracket, and that is the bracket right there. So you guys can see this piece here broke off, right? So that snapped off because they use very thin plastic, and I was told the superseded console had thicker plastic here, and it had a metal reinforcement. That's what Husqvarna's customer support told me on the phone. That's the reason why they have a superseded number for this console. So going back to my video where pretty much I went over why this issue happened in the first place. If you haven't seen that video, click in the top right of your screen. I'll link that for you. So just getting an overhead shot, you guys can see this is the bracket there that broke, but if you'll notice, these are supposed to be in line with another, and you guys can see this whole piece here twisted as well, right? So you would assume that they would make this whole piece out of metal or something, or just make it out of thicker plastic so that this warping and cracking and breaking issue didn't happen again. That would make sense to me. However, I have the brand new console here, still made out of plastic, and if we compare the piece from the old bracket to the new one, it's exactly the same thickness plastic. So this was direct from Husqvarna, back ordered because so many people are ordering them, obviously because these pieces keep breaking. Check this out, look at it, already so flimsy, right? Now to remove the old console here takes about 15 minutes. Obviously you can go fairly quickly to remove this one. You don't have to worry about breaking anything on this one. However, when I go to install this one, I want to be super careful that I don't break anything because yeah, these are on back order again. Husqvarna didn't update the design. It's unfortunate. So I'm going to put this in the machine and then get that hex shaft for the friction wheel lubricated. Basically, that was the issue, I think, that created this problem in the first place. There was no lubrication. Loads of stress went onto that bracket, and yeah. So I'm just here in my shed. Believe it or not, I have another Husqvarna ST224 identical snowblower. This one was left outside to sit in the elements. Same console, same cutout for the heated hand grip switch. This is literally the same model. However, my customer had an issue with the carburetor. It was left to sit outside and the bowl nut seized. He tried to remove it and snapped it. So I ended up ordering a new carburetor for this thing because all the threads were mangled. So believe it or not, the carburetor for this one also back ordered. However, my customer that owns this one brought this machine in for servicing years ago. And here is our shifter. Check this out. Shifts nice and smooth. And I'll get a shot up underneath to show you guys. Identical console. So you guys can see here, white lithium grease, lubricated on all the pivot points. Obviously the cable and whatnot seems to be a little rusty, but if we come up to here, check that out, guys. Same plastic, same design, not broken, because things were lubricated. Also, apologies if you guys hear the fans going. There is currently a heat wave going through and it is incredibly hot here. So I'm gonna put this console back together, probably bring you back to lubricate that, and then yeah, wraps up this repair. I'm a little bummed out that they didn't upgrade that console. I was kind of hoping for either A, thicker plastic, or B, a metal reinforcement, which would have been really nice. So the only thing I'm gonna have to do now is, like I said, make sure that I lubricate that thoroughly, and then make sure that my customer either lubricates it himself frequently or brings it to me for service so that I can just keep lubricating that. And you guys saw the condition of the other one. This one, 2017, literally mint condition, very low hours. That broke because of, improper lubrication, whereas the other one sits outside, obviously carburetor issues, but the main thing was it didn't break because it was lubricated. So I got the console pretty much reinstalled here, but there's one thing that I wanted to point out on this shifter lever right here. When I took this one out, there was a nylon washer on the inside to the right on this bracket here. So it's going to look a little something like this, and that nylon washer goes to the inside of this piece here. Now, the reason why I wanted to include that is because if you're removing the other gear selector and chute control lever, they don't actually have that nylon washer. So if we look to the left, you can see number 7. Number 7 is the nylon washer. And if you look at the other two here, you're going to notice there is no nylon washer. I didn't see one on the left side here, so I just wanted to point that out. And then as I'm installing these adjusters here, before I go ahead and tighten up this bolt to squeeze the two plastic ends together, I'm loading it up with white lithium grease. It may look messy, but trust me, that's what you want. You want to make sure that everything rotates freely and that nothing's going to bind up. And all of these cables have these little green rubber boots, and they're going to seal up the cap right there that allows the cable to travel through the conduit. So what I'm going to do is shoot some lubricant into there as well before I start moving this cable through it. Put that cap back down, and then I won't have to worry about, the cable grabbing inside of the conduit. So that cable will also be lubricated, as will the pivot point of the adjuster. So once again, that little nylon washer in there goes in between the metal adjuster and the plastic bracket. And then again, white lithium grease, more white lithium grease. So lubricate these things good. Again, don't worry if it's messy. You're saving yourself a lot of headache in the end. And just to point out, this bolt right here is only going to tighten up a certain amount because you won't be able to tighten the nut past the shoulder of the bolt that goes through there. So once you get it tight, that's it. Don't try to crank it down any tighter to get it any stiffer, because this is going to lead up to this point right here. I want to show you. Check how much play is in this, right? Like, that doesn't seem like it's supposed to be like that. But I'm going to take you over and show you the other one, and that's exactly how Husqvarna has designed this system. Very poorly, right? Like, you would think that's not supposed to be like that, and they figured it out that, that has a lot of play, so they went ahead and added this bracket here. And this is your main shifter. So not only is there a lot of play here, but there's a very weak bracket there. And again, poor design by Husqvarna. So I'm in the shed here on the other Husqvarna, and just to show you guys, exactly the same. Like, look at all the play, right? That's how they've designed it. And of course, this one also has the metal reinforcement bracket there to try to limit some of that play. That's how Husqvarna wants their equipment to be, I guess. So don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong if you see this whole thing just kind of loose like that. That's how it is. Unfortunately, the more play here is going to create a different angle down there. So instead of pulling just straight out, you're now pulling on an angle, right? Which is obviously not ideal. But this is pretty much just an update video, going over the part that Husqvarna sent me. Now, to lube that chute control cable, I have used a little bit of PB Blaster here. So like I said, just went down that cable. So that shifts nice and smooth. Obviously, all my pivot points are nice and smooth as well. And then for the main chute control, left and right, that's this one here. So I'll go ahead and turn that. That rotates nice and smooth as well. Locks into place, no problems here. So we can center that up. So at this point, while it's flipped up, I'm going to remove my access panel and lubricate the bottom end. So a little bit of my silicone wax and grease remover on a rag, wiping down as much of that, what I believe to be was nickel anti-seize off of this hex shifter shaft. And then what I'm gonna do is move the friction wheel over to the left because we're fighting the spring tension here, and it always wants to return it into reverse. So when that shifter cable breaks, this machine always snaps back into reverse. So I'll have to move this over and hold it so I can wipe off the rest of the gunk under there as well. And as you guys probably saw in my first video, when I let that go, it's stuck just like that, right? So once there's grease on here, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna bring this all the way over and I'm gonna let it go, and it should go all the way back nice and freely and not get jammed up. Basically that nickel anti-seize, or that lifetime lubrication that Husqvarna puts on these, it just kind of gets all dry and hard and it jams up in between the friction wheel bearing and the hex shaft here. So here's a perfect example. Our friction wheel is currently stuck on the non-lubricated spot, and I've taken a little bit of my low temp grease. There you go. So lubricate the rest using Mystic low temp grease. This is a JT6, so this is similar to a white lithium. You could use white lithium if you want, but I found that this stuff is like really buttery. It's quite nice, so you're not gonna get stringy bits that are gonna come off and hit your friction plate, which could then get on your rubber friction disc. You don't want that. So I'll get a shot of this now. Slides nice and smooth, does not get bound up. Go ahead and lubricate the pivot points on the arm that moves the friction wheel and also the spring. And then lastly, you guys can see that this main gear here is bone dry. Again, this was never serviced by me. So I'm going to take a big glob here, roll the wheel, and coat this gear with some grease. Now you don't need a whole lot of grease, but you want to make sure that there is some there. And then before you put your access panel back on, wipe down your friction plate using some of that oil and grease remover. So that's good enough. I can reinstall this panel. Now to get the cable installed, not that tricky. You just put the cable up through the slot and then make sure you lock the cable into the hole on that, and then route it through this right here. And then we'll go ahead and pop this guy in there. And then to install the shifter cable here, you're gonna have to bend the conduit. And I wanted to point out that the cables, they go through this opening under this screw here, and then they go back through the light to come up on the other side like that, right? So same thing here. You're gonna notice that I undid this screw to allow me to move this so that I can slip the cable in through there, and then I'll go ahead and put that screw in after. Basically, you want to be super careful not to break that, so you're going to have to pre-bend your cable because this conduit is thick and it doesn't want to bend unless you actually go and kind of force it into the position that you want. So to try to give you a visual aid of what I'm saying, because it doesn't come like that. This thing came like a circle, right? Like a normal cable would. So you have to try to get this cable into as much of a natural curve, as close to 90 degrees as you can, so that when you put this in, there's no outside pressure. There cannot be any twisting force here, or else you're just gonna snap that again. All right, so I'm pretty close here. I push it back, you guys are gonna notice that the plastic tab does not bend out because now the cable has its natural bend like that. So what I would recommend is you just pull it out and really bend it and then put it back in. I had to do it about 4 or 5 times, being honest with you, to get it like that. And then again, I'm using PB Blaster and I'm gonna spray that down. You're gonna notice on this one, doesn't have that green rubber boot. So I'm not sure why this one wouldn't have it, but it doesn't. So that's something to consider. And cable management here is gonna be super important. You know, they have this little piece of plastic with a tab there because, again, the conduit, you know, so now I have to bend it here to force it back away from the tire without breaking it there. So you're gonna wanna hold it kind of like here, and then again, you know, force this cable in ways that kind of make the cable route unnaturally, but that's how Husqvarna designed it. Now once you get that clipped in and you're happy with how it looks, everything's square, nothing's twisting, you're gonna notice that when you pull your cable up, it's not gonna come far enough to your bracket here, even with this in the farthest back spot, which is supposed to be reverse. So what you're gonna have to do is come down to your friction wheel here, slide it over to the left, and then clamp it. Basically, that moves the arm over, which is going to give you some extra cable here. So even when this thing is in reverse, this thing has full tension on it, which is, again, another ridiculous design. Like, the amount of tension that goes on this tiny little cable is absolutely absurd. So the amount of white lithium grease I'm using here may seem a bit excessive, but I can assure you it is to prevent future failure. However, I'm gonna try to get a shot of this as best I can. Right now we're in 4th gear and everything's lubricated, even the cable inside. And I wanna see if I can hold the camera still enough to see the twisting. Like, it wants to go. So at this point, what I'm going to unfortunately recommend to my customer is that he never goes beyond 4th gear. Now imagine that. This is a 2017 Husqvarna snowblower, extremely low hours. I mean, you guys see this thing, it's in mint condition compared to the other one. And here I am giving a professional recommendation that he never goes higher than 4th gear, because 5th gear could crack that bracket and 6th gear will easily break it, 100%. So going back to this absolutely massive return spring on the friction wheel arm there, the only way to limit tension on that cable is to replace this spring. And the only thing I could do would be to remove that bar and take one wind out of that spring. And I can't even imagine what a job that would be, because obviously there's a little E-clip here. It looks like you could just pull this down, but in order to pull that out, well, you have to split the housing probably, right? To take the whole front end off of the back half of the unit. So that's a huge job. So at this point, it works in reverse, and then 1st through 4th, my customer is just gonna have to live with that, or he can be the one that risks putting it in 5th and 6th. And like, just to show you guys, we're in 4th right now. I'm gonna try to bump it into 5th. See that? Like, the whole plastic bracket is distorting. Like, I wouldn't even chance it. Just leave it in 4th, right? It doesn't really bend all that much going into 4th, but as soon as you try to go into 5th, the whole thing starts cranking sideways. So again, if you guys own one of these machines, don't go beyond 4th gear. Well, that's going to wrap up today's video. You know, it's really unfortunate that Husqvarna didn't reinforce that plastic console using either thicker plastic or using a metal reinforcement. But I guess if they did, they would have almost been admitting fault for having a design flaw in the first place, and quite possibly could open themselves up to maybe some class action lawsuits in the future. Not saying that's not off the table now. I mean, if you had 10,000 of these units with this issue at $55 a replacement console here in Canada, I mean, you're looking at easily over $500,000 just for a small batch of 10,000. And I'm sure they sell hundreds of thousands of these units. Just to be clear, this product line has been discontinued, so they no longer sell these as new units. And instead of, you know, fixing the design flaw on this console, they instead chose to just keep mass producing those replacement consoles, and they've designed a brand new model of snowblower to sell. So again, kind of unfortunate, but it's just the way some of these companies operate. With that being said though, I wanted to give a shout out to Mix Mowers from the UK for sending me some keychains and stickers. So big shout out to Mick there. If you want to subscribe to my channel, you can click here, as well as check out Mick's channel, and you can click over here to watch one of my previous videos. You know, I upload every single week, so be sure to stop on by next week, check channel out for new content. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.